Welcome to the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast, where we remember a time when stacks of cards were held together with rubber bands and Mickey mantles were put in bike spokes. We hope you will enjoy and reminisce as you come along with us as we tell stories about the baseball cards from the Golden Age of Baseball. We will examine the state of the vintage baseball card market and talk to some of the greatest collectors in the hobby. You won't be hearing us talk about any chrome or shiny cards here. Now, to take you on this retrospective journey, here's your host, direct from the shallow end of the gene pool, my son, Mike Moynihan.
Yo, and hello everybody, Mike here, baseball collector, and welcome to another episode of the Golden Age of Cardboard podcast. I'm going to start saying baseball collector because I'm going to reference some things. That is my normal YouTube channel when I'm not doing Golden Age of Cardboard, and you can, I'll have some videos about our Strongsville experience, which is what we're going to talk about today, which happened just last weekend. I've got my good friend, traveling companion, Andy. She blinded me with refractors. Andy, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. Just, back to work today, rested up a little bit yesterday. We'll get into that story here in a moment, I think. So, but yeah, it was, good weekend other than some things. But
well, we will go through all things Strongsville. We're going to give you kind of our thoughts and our just what we saw, what we did, and really try to give you an idea of, hey, should I go to this show? So you're going to hear from us what our perspective was. Again, these are only our opinions. Obviously, people are going to have different experiences, different perspectives, but we'll start with just traveling. So Andy normally, by the way, Andy and I have been to shows in California, Dallas. We've been to the Burbank show. We've been now to the
Chicago.
Where?
Chicago,
Cleveland. We were in Cleveland together. Atlantic City.
Yeah, we've been places.
We've been quite a few places, and there's no one I'd rather travel with and go to a show with than Andy. So
we have a lot of fun.
We do have a lot of fun, and the travel though is just kind of an interesting part of it. I know you were very disappointed that my dad did not take, you flew to Dallas instead of driving to Dallas, which means my dad didn't get to take you to the airport. Did that disappoint you?
It disappointed me. And as you will learn, it turned out to be a big mistake.
Okay. Well, let's get into it. So we went to Strongsville last Thursday. Andy got there Thursday afternoon. I got there Thursday late afternoon, and we proceeded to fly to Cleveland with relatively no issues. We get to Cleveland, we get to the hotel. We were staying at the Best Western Plus, I guess it was, which was really close to the airport. It's like 8 minutes away.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll let you tell your story. Do you want to finish the travel? Then we can talk about the show.
Yeah, we'll go ahead and finish the travel. So you can tell the story like on the way back up to the point where, I got off of the plane in Dallas.
Okay, so we're coming back Saturday was our plan. We were going to be at the show all day Friday and most of the day Saturday. We were going to leave around 4 o'clock to head to the airport, which was, again, most of the day. There, we found out our flight was delayed. We ended up having about an hour delay.
It was 2 hours.
2 hours delay? Okay.
Yeah, it was 2.
2 hours. We get there, and I'm like, hey, Andy, go to the desk and try to get a later flight, because at this pace, we're not going to get there in time for you to catch your flight back to Oklahoma City from Dallas.
Yes.
So he does that. Great. He now has a later flight, so much less stress on getting to Dallas. We end up getting to Dallas and sitting on the tarmac for 45 minutes after we land. There had been really bad storms in Dallas, so there were so many planes that hadn't been able to take off that there were no gates available. So finally, 45 minutes after sitting on the tarmac, finishing a couple of movies, whatever, everybody, we finally get to the gate. And then I'm up at the very front. So I had texted you while we were on the plane, like, hey, I'm leaving.
Yeah.
I'll catch up with you soon. I wasn't going to, you were in the back of the plane, which is crazy. I got right off, got to my car and started heading home. What happened to you?
Okay. So they did start letting those of us that had connecting flights off. So I got off of the plane relatively quick, but by the time we had sat there for 45 minutes, we're getting close to the time where my flight would start to board, right? So I'm,
hustling.
Picture a movie where the guy's running through the airport, gets to the gate, like out of breath, and they're like, oh, we're about to close the door. That's kind of how I envisioned this thing going. But so I run through, because they dropped us off at gate, I don't know, like B something. It was A19s where I had to go. So I get there, and to my surprise, they haven't started boarding yet. So I texted you, and I'm like, I made it, right? No problem.
Yeah, I thought all things were cool. I thought, great.
Okay, so for all the listeners, from this point on, Mike does not know the rest of the story yet. I wanted to get his live reaction to all this, so okay. I purposely didn't tell him until we were recording this. So our flight starts to get delayed. So it's delayed first like 30 minutes, then another 30 minutes, then another 30 minutes. Then they're like, okay, we're moving you guys from A19 all the way back over to B, where I started from, where I ran all the way across the airport from to get there, right? And once we get over there, they're like, all right, they're finishing cleaning the plane. It's just going to be another few minutes and we'll start boarding, right? 20 minutes later, I look up at the screen, flight canceled.
No.
Flight canceled. So by this time, it's like, oh man, it had to be 1 o'clock in the morning at this point. So they send us over to another gate. They're like, go to this gate. They'll take care of you over there as far as like, figuring out what to do. I get over there. There's several hundred people in line. They have one person to handle all this. This lady was listening to people complain for probably like 10 or 15 minutes. She walks off. No one replaces her. No one replaces her. So you have all these angry people in line. So these two ladies approached me that were on our flight from Oklahoma City. These two ladies were probably in their 60s. They looked at me and they're like, hey, I guess they heard me talking to somebody else in line, that I was trying to get back to Oklahoma City. They're like, hey, we are thinking about getting an Uber and going to the Greyhound station to ride the Greyhound bus home. I'm like, at this point, well, there's not a lot of good options. This is an option, right? Because I'd already looked up, the train wasn't going to be coming back to Oklahoma City until 5 o'clock the next day. All the flights were full until Monday morning. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. So we Uber to the Greyhound station. The Greyhound bus is leaving at 3:30 a.m. And we had already bought our tickets on the way there, right? So once we get there, I learned that this Greyhound bus makes 6 stops along the way.
Okay.
This was not a straight shot. This goes to like Wichita Falls, Texas, Lawton, Oklahoma, Chickasha, Oklahoma. So we get on the bus at 3:30. I make it back to Oklahoma City at 10:30 in the morning. Uber home. I get home at 11 a.m. yesterday morning.
And is your car at the airport?
No. I Ubered to the airport.
Okay.
So because I didn't want to leave my vehicle there and pay the parking and all that stuff. So I just Ubered to the airport. So it was a wild ride home, needless to say. What's your reaction to that, Mike?
Nightmarish is the word I would use.
Yeah.
Did you sleep on the bus at least?
I tried. It was not as easy as I thought it was going to be. Luckily, I didn't have anybody in the seat next to me. But yeah, I mean, other than that, not being able to sleep on the bus, it was fine. I mean, obviously,
I can't believe there would be anybody on the bus with you at a 3:30 a.m. departure for Oklahoma City.
Well, but like I said, there's these 6 stops along the way. So there's people getting off at each stop. And what I also learned on this was like, you may stop at one of these places to drop somebody off, but they've also scheduled somebody else to pick up there. So we got to one stop like 30 minutes early, but we still had to sit there and wait for the other person that was getting on the bus to go somewhere else. So it was going to be a 7-hour trip, regardless of, it didn't matter if you got someplace early. It was just going to take that long. So
did that sour you on the whole weekend, or did that just?
No, it didn't sour me on the whole weekend. Like I said, it was one of those things where it was kind of, I think by the time that it was to the point to get on the bus, like I was just tired and delirious. I mean, it was just kind of like foggy from that point on. Like I dozed off a couple times on the bus, but you couldn't really sleep. No, it didn't damper anything. And honestly, like I think it just gave like a really funny story as well. So so it was pretty funny. And I thought about because I could have called you, I could have called my brother who lives in Durant. I have friends here that I could have called and I know all of you would have came and picked me up, but I was sitting there thinking like, by the time somebody gets me and then, by that time they have to drive me all the way home and then drive back, that's like 7 hours too. So it's like, if anybody's going to make the 7-hour trip, it should just be me. Right.
Crazy. We'll talk later more about that, but so we get to the show, or we get to the hotel Thursday, we get booked into our room. JT was going to stay with us, our other typical traveling companion. He just he likes hanging around greatness. So he likes being with you and me, there's
got to be another reason, but we'll go with that.
I promise you, he's laughing out loud if he listens to this and hears that comment, because it's just not true. But we do like hanging out together. So we're there. Dave is already there, Blue Jacket, a bunch of our friends. Some of these people you may know, some of them you may not if you listen on podcast and you don't watch YouTube. But they're friends, right? They're hobby buddies. And so we go down to the bar almost instantly. Like we literally just threw our stuff in the room and went down to meet up with, there were probably 8 or 10, maybe a dozen different guys that we knew in the hobby there, hanging out, shooting the bull. And that was great. Pretty chill. The bartender felt like she was a little overwhelmed, but it gets worse for her.
She was very overwhelmed.
She was very overwhelmed. But we had a good time, and then went to bed thinking, okay, we're going to wake up. But I got to tell you guys something about Andy. When we go to a show, Andy wakes up at the butt crack of dawn on the morning of a show.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if it's excitement or just being in a different place. Who knows? But he's up really early.
It's all of the above, because I'm not like that in my everyday life. I can
right. But we ended up going to the show. It started starting at noon was when the show opened. Noon to 7 on Friday were the show hours. And that was early entry. If you weren't early entry, it was 2:00. And here's my funny story. I didn't have a ticket. I thought I'll just buy a ticket at the door. Well, if you buy them at the door, it's $40. This is not not an expensive show to go to. Honestly, it was $25 for a weekend pass, early entry. Is that right, Andy?
Yeah, it was $25 for the 3 days, I believe. Yeah, or 4 days, however many it was.
Yeah, 3-day pass, whatever. Not expensive. So that's definitely a plus on the show, on the thing. Our hotel was cheap. I think I paid $200 for 2 nights. Which I never squared up with you, by the way. You owe me money.
That's what everybody always says. That's what JT says.
So we end up getting to the show. I go over there about 11 o'clock to, buy a ticket. They say, no, just order it online. It's way cheaper. So I started to do that. JT did the same thing. I ordered you and I's tickets, and you did pay me back for that. So
yeah, I'm not on the hook for that.
Not on the hook for that. You did pay me back, but we did order tickets, and I'm like, I'm not getting the email confirmation. JT had gotten one, our other friends had gotten one. I'm like, so I walk back over there, and they end up looking me up and find out that I gorilla fingered my email address. I couldn't spell Hotmail correctly.
It's a tough word.
You know, we've been on for however long. We haven't talked about a single card thing yet. So if anybody's still listening, I'm impressed.
Thank you.
The Adventures of Mike and Andy. That's what
Right.
And we get to the show. We get there a little bit early, and the line starts growing, and it's curling around. There's hundreds of people in the line by the time the show opens, which just showed the popularity. I think there were a lot of people wanting to go to the show, which had me kind of excited, right? It was in a new venue this year. It was in a arena right across the parking lot from the hotel where it has been traditionally, which is where we stayed. And we go into the show and start looking around. What was your first impression when you got in?
You said arena. Elaborate.
Well, it's multiple hockey rinks,
Right.
like arcade, a deal in the middle, I think a bar called the Penalty Box. So it was
it's not an arena like you would think of at like the National or something like that. The show itself is inside like a hockey rink.
Right. One hockey rink, and there were two at least.
Right. There was actually some junior hockey games going on next door.
That's right.
Yeah.
So you could look at cards or watch junior hockey. That was your choices. But once we got into the show, what was your first impression of the venue and the show setup?
So honestly, I'd never been to the show, so I didn't really know what to expect. But just from hearing people talk about it, I expected it to be larger than it was. And when I saw the place where they had held it previously, I was like, oh my gosh. Because this was just like a
Ballroom.
A small room, really, where they had previously held it. So is it a big show? No. Is it bigger than it was? Yes. But I expected it to be a little bit larger of a show. And I guess that would be my first impression of just walking in.
Yeah. My same feeling. Walked in. Obviously, we could kind of see in from the front where we were waiting. And it looked, okay, this is a neat show. What I was excited about and my expectation was every table, would have tons of stuff that I'd be interested in. So I'd be, unlike most shows where you're skipping table after table of modern stuff that I'm certainly have zero interest in, I bet it had the same number of vintage tables that the Dallas Card Show does. It's just all condensed into one place, right?
That's a good question. As far as like strictly vintage tables, I would say it had more than what Dallas will have, because a lot of the Dallas tables, there's a lot of tables that have vintage, but it's kind of mixed in with the modern. I would say as far as strictly vintage tables, I would say it had more than Dallas. But I mean, I get your point.
Yeah, so it's all condensed into one skating rink, right? One ice rink. So we were early in the line. I don't know, the first 10 people we were in. And so I went straight to the back because I could work my way back. What I didn't realize in that moment that I learned shortly thereafter is there was plenty of room. And I did like that it was spread out. I felt like you could walk up to a table. It wasn't overly crowded. What I noticed weren't there is tons of Pelican cases. There were some, but not nearly what you see at a normal regional show, right?
Yeah, there was definitely not a lot of those. And it tended to be a much older crowd than you would typically see at a Dallas show as well.
Yeah, for sure.
I felt pretty young there. I'm in my mid-40s, so
yeah,
there wasn't a lot of kids. Let's say there was a few younger people, but not a ton.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought about that. And most of those older people are not, Pelly boys, right? So that was something I noticed. I immediately went to see Craig and Holly at Craig Halbig's table. He's an amazing dealer and a really good friend. And so looked at his, I made my first purchase there at his table, actually, a 1968 Topps Tony Oliva PSA 7, which was great to kind of break the ice with a friend, and he gave me a great deal and all that, which was good. And then it just kind of walked the aisles, right? I found myself stopping and spending time at almost every table that first kind of go around and just seeing what they had. And I'm telling you guys, if you want to see amazing vintage and stuff that rivals the National, it's this show. From just what's in the showcases and what's available, I was blown away with that aspect and how much of it there was. How'd you feel about all that, Andy? Like, as you started seeing tables and gravitating through the show, what was your impression of the inventory that was there?
Yeah. So what I did immediately is you're talking about skipping over tables. Like, I kind of skipped over a lot of tables the first round that had like a lot of 50s and 60s stuff that you do see a lot at shows. I was more, looking to see the stuff that you're not going to see at every show first, and then kind of make my way back and then spend more time looking at each table. That's kind of how I took it, but it was impressive stuff. I mean, and I know you're probably going to talk about pricing and stuff, and we'll get into that whenever you want to. But yeah, it was impressive inventory, and a lot of dealers that you will see at a lot of different shows. But then there are some that I'd never seen at any shows previously. So it's always good to see a mix, I think, of some of those people that are traveling the show circuit, and then some that are just more local to that area.
Yeah. And my strategy going in, for those of you that only listen on podcast, if you go to Baseball Collector, last week I had bought a rather large collection of vintage up in Philadelphia. I flew up to Philly and bought what we're calling the Grail collection. And from that Grail collection, it kind of put a damper on what my budget might have been for Strongsville had I not done the Grail collection. But I still, I brought a decent amount of money, and was wanting to pick up some smaller cards, $30, $50, $80, $100 type cards. And I wanted to pick up kind of as many of those as I could within my budget. And I was doing that for a while. Like, that was kind of my thing. I got a 52 Bowman George Kell for $35 in a PSA 3. I got a Larry Doby 52 Bowman. I got a Monty Irvin. So I was picking up some cards at what I thought was very fair pricing. And then I had brought two cards from the Grail collection, a 1933 Gowdy Ruth, the red background in an SGC 2.5, and a 1933 Gowdy Ruth yellow background in a 2.5 SGC. And I was trying to move those. My goal was to get there and I'm going to find somebody that's going to want these cards. And I ended up selling them to Ashish. He's a very popular vintage dealer. He's at all the big shows. If you go to a card show that's of any size at all, Ashish is going to be there. And he's got an amazing, I mean, his and all of his showcases are full of Grail cards that all of us would envy and love to own in our collections. And it's just amazing stuff. And he ended up buying those cards from me, which gave me a healthy influx of cash, but I still needed to get that home because I'm trying to get to even on this Grail collection purchase. And then towards the end of the day on the Friday, I came across a card that our buddy Dave basically said, "Come on, Mike, you have to buy this card. Like, look how good this is, and look at this, and look at that." And he was talking up the card. The dealer didn't have to do anything because Dave was doing all the salesman's work for him. And you were there, I think, for most of that, if not all of it.
I was there, yeah.
And I'm like, "But God, it was about twice what I had left, which means I would have to dip into funds that had kind of been earmarked in my brain to bring home." And but he's like, "You got to buy it. You got to buy it." And so I end up talking to the dealer. This is all on Strongsville Day 1 video where I talk about, but we're going to go into it a little bit more about what happened beyond what you saw on camera. And that is the flip. So we ended up doing a flip, and I don't know if you guys ever do flips, but I've done 2 now. Both of them Andy's been involved with some way, shape, or form. We did one. We actually did one with Ashish, his son.
Yeah, at Burbank.
In Burbank, and we won that one. And that was what, $100 flip?
Yes.
$80, $100 flip, I think.
It was 100.
And then this one was the guy had the 49 Bowman Jackie Robinson SGC3. Right. Yeah. And it was a stunning card. And kind of one of those, man, I would, who doesn't want a Jackie rookie, right? I certainly did. And David pretty much talked me into it, although I didn't take a lot of convincing because I looked it up. He had it priced at $4,500.
It's a Jackie rookie. I mean, you don't need a lot of selling.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of, come on, Mike. Well, of course I want that card. Who wouldn't, right? So, of course. So he had it priced at $4,500. I wanted to be closer to $4,100, $4,000, $4,100. He kind of came down a little bit to $4,300. And this is where what is on the other video, some controversy might have came about. So I did the flip, or he agreed. I said, hey, let's flip for it. And either $4,500, I'll pay your full price, or I get it for $4,100. And so now it's a $400 flip. And I'm always, even when I think about it, it's like your card, your flip. You get the quarter, you flip it. I'm just gonna, you can even call it. Like, I don't care. He ends up getting his buddy was working with him, his son. So it wasn't his kid; it was a friend of his kid, a young man, probably 10 or 12 years old.
Yeah,
the coin. He had the quarter and he flipped it. So he flips it, Andy. And what happens next?
Well, as it's coming down, he touches it. And then it lands on the table, right?
Yeah.
The showcase. And basically at that point, you're not supposed to touch it as it comes down.
Right.
If you're gonna, like, there's 2 ways to do a flip. You either catch it and flip it like that, or you just let it just hit naturally on whatever surface there is, and that's the result. But he, and he didn't know, but he reached out and touched it as it's coming down. And I think, what was it? Was it tails?
It was heads.
Heads. Okay.
But I looked at the guy pretty much instantly, and like, we're not going to count. Like, I didn't know the result of the flip. Right. And it was like, the guy said, a lot of people are criticizing, like, even if you would have won, would you have asked it to be reflipped? Absolutely, 100%. I would have asked for it to be reflipped.
Yeah.
And the only people that would say that I wouldn't ask for that don't know me very well, because it was just done wrong, right?
Yeah.
Period. Regardless of the outcome.
And it wasn't the kid's fault. He just,
It wasn't the kid's fault. It was an act. He hit it, and it just, right. it made it all bad mojo. Like it instantly tainted the result. Yeah. The dealer would have won the first flip.
Right.
So I looked at him like, hey, look, we're going to redo this, right? And he agreed, and we flipped. The kid flipped it again. Hey, just don't let it touch anything. You can watch the video. It's there. I'm summarizing as best I can.
Yeah.
It flipped. I won the flip. I looked at the dealer and I said, look, are you cool with this? Like, because I probably could have done 2 out of 3. There's some ways I could have handled it better but in the moment, we agreed and I paid the money.
Well, and the thing is about the people that are saying, oh, you should have done this or you should have done that. The dealer was perfectly fine.
Yeah. With
redoing it. And, that's what matters. Like, regardless of what anybody else says in the comments, like, this was, you and him doing a deal.
Right.
So if he's okay with it, it really doesn't matter what anybody else thinks,
right.
Honestly. And you were calling for the reflip before, you even looked. So if it would have came down in favor of you, there was still going to be a reflip.
Yeah, 100%. And I went to the dealer the next day, who turns out to be a really cool guy, and has an amazing, like his cards were just bonkers awesome. A whole Gaudy set, great, like just stupidly cool stuff. And I was like, "Hey, are we cool?" And he's like, "Yeah, the kid's famous because they posted it on Instagram or somewhere or something."
Yeah.
And he's like, his mom's even given his like, "How do you not know how to flip a coin?" And his dad was like, "I got to take him to coin flipping school. I'm sorry." Like he was apologizing for the kid, and
I
and
mean,
I'm like, "Look, I'm totally cool. I won the flip, but I want to make sure we're okay, and that no hard feelings or anything about the way it all went down." And he's like, "No, we're totally cool." So the dealer doesn't have a problem with it. So as you said, he didn't have a problem with it in the moment, and he didn't have a problem with it the next day. So
right.
everyone else can just zip it, I guess.
And quite honestly, like I know you, and if he would have said that he had a problem with it, you would have just paid him the extra money.
It was more for fun than anything, right? Just to
yes. Yeah, like it's sometimes people they take these things way more serious than the people that are actually involved.
right,
And they act like they have more of a vested interest than like you and he did.
right.
So it's it can be funny in the comments sometimes.
So let's get into pricing a little bit, because I didn't buy a ton of cards, but the ones I did, I found the dealers to be amenable and willing to negotiate. But there were so many cards, and you probably felt the same way as you looked at showcases. And I went, "Wow, that's highly priced. Like I'm not even gonna try," because prices were high on the stickers. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think that that's anything new as far as like that doesn't separate this show from any other that I've been to. I mean, that's always the case. There's always going to be some dealers that are they're just priced way higher than everybody else. And they could have the same thing that the guy next to them has and be asking twice as much.
Yeah, that is completely true. It wasn't. You're right. It wasn't different than any other show. I wish it. I will tell you, almost every card I saw had a price on it. Like I didn't see a lot of tables where I was interested in stuff where I had to ask what the price was. It was there, either written on a sticker or somewhere on the holder or whatever. I don't remember there being any times I was going, "How much do you have on that?"
Yeah, I don't remember seeing hardly anything that wasn't stickered. I mean, outside of the auction houses, which their stuff isn't for sale generally.
Right.
It's going to be up for auction soon, but it's it's not going to have a sticker on it. But yeah, outside of those tables, I don't recall. I mean, I'm sure there probably was, one or two that maybe I just can't recall. But yeah, almost everything was stickered.
One thing that surprised me was there were some auction houses there, as you just mentioned, kind of either accepting consignments or giving assessments for consignments, things like that, or they had some eye candy out for upcoming auctions, which is always amazing. I saw one of you and I's favorite cards of all time, the 32 US Caramel Lou Gehrig.
Oh boy.
I think it was an 8.
It was nice. I don't recall the grade. I just remember seeing it, thinking, "Man, that's a banger."
It was a banger. But a surprising thing was SGC was there accepting cards, as was JSA. SGC was not nearly as busy as I expected it to be.
I don't think I ever saw a time where they were like what I would say super busy. I mean, there was always people there, but once again, this is just for everyone out there. This was a relatively small show. So, you only have so many people in the room. So there's, out of everyone that was there, let's just say if 1 out of 10 people in there were going to submit something to SGC, that still wouldn't be a ton of people.
That's true. I never felt crowded at all, even in the height of Friday. And I felt Friday was more busy than Saturday, but I never felt crowded. And I've heard that in previous years, you felt like completely crowded. And that makes sense given the size of the room used previously. I never felt crowded. It felt I could walk around pretty freely, pretty easily. You could look up the ice rink was so small. You could look, hey, where's Andy? And like you said, you could just look up and, oh, there he is. You know,
you're not going to get lost in there like you could at a national.
That's 100% true. You're not going to get lost.
But to your point about them being crowded in the past in that smaller room, I think if we just took the YouTubers that were at the show and put them in that small room, it would be crowded.
Yeah. And truthfully, that would having so many people that I know through the community was pretty great. And getting to see guys, I met a bunch of guys for the first time that I knew their channel, but I didn't know them personally. I'd never shaken their hand or said hello or talked to them or any of that kind of good stuff. Old friends like Orlando and Greg and just guys like I hadn't met Greg before though, although he's been on this show multiple times. You know, it was a hoot. I think a lot of the guys that we saw there have been on this show, as a matter of fact, and because they're all the same kindred spirits, right? They all love old cardboard. But were you surprised how many different YouTubers were there?
Honestly, I was like, beforehand, before we went, like, I think you and I both knew of a lot of the guys that would be there for sure, but there was a lot of them that I had no idea they were coming. And it was, probably twice as many YouTubers there as what I thought there would be. It was pretty impressive.
It was, and we took that to the next level Friday night. I think we all left the show around 6 and headed up to the room, kind of chilled for a minute, and then there was a YouTube content creator get together and people that just listen or anybody that was involved that knew it was going on was certainly welcome to be there. And we met in a ballroom in the hotel. That's when the the bartender got really overwhelmed because we descended downstairs and that was a packed room. That got hot for sure because there were a lot of us stuffed in that room.
Yeah, there was a lot of people in that room. And the bartender, she definitely got overwhelmed. She was having to serve all the drinks at the bar, but also she was serving food out in like their little restaurant area. And she's mentioned that this was like her 4th day on the job also. So, yeah, she was kind of a little flustered, but that's understandable.
Yeah, we all got to drink. It was no big deal, right? And that was just a lot of fun, sitting down, getting to have conversations. I wish I could have spent more time individually with a bunch of people. I kind of felt like this was put on by our buddy Chris from Missouri. He kind of coordinated it, and thank you to Chris for, he bought pizza for everybody. I mean, he was going out of his way to make sure people had a good time. And that, when you have somebody like that in your crew, that's just something to be appreciative of. Yeah. And he certainly carried the mantle. He called himself the mayor of Strongsville, which was kind of hilarious.
I thought he was the mayor of Strongsville. Is that just made up?
I think it's just made up. But if we would have had an election that night, I think we doubled the population of Strongsville. I think he would have been elected. So
I was under the impression that he already had been. So he was proclaiming to be the mayor under false pretenses. Wow.
But hanging out with familiar faces and all that. And then Saturday, our short day at the show, which we've already kind of gone into what happened after that. But for me, after I bought the Jackie, I had a couple $100 in my pocket kind of thing. And I was being very selective on what I would buy with that, and ended up picking up a few small things, nothing huge. And, but we got to go to lunch on Saturday, you, me, Dave, and JT. And that was one of the funnest things we did because the 4 of us just got to hang out of the crowd, out of the crazy, and just be friends again,
Now, was it Friday or Saturday when you made your way onto the ice?
That was Saturday. I wasn't going to bring that up, but feel free to discuss it.
So we get back. I think this is right when we got back from lunch, right?
It was.
So Mike walks up to the the lady up front at this ice skating rink, and he's talking about, you know, how he wants to go out there and ice skate, talking about how he's from Texas and he's never ice skated. And she thought this was just a brilliant idea. She thought this was going to be funny. You know, he was going to be falling all over the place. So she's like, sure. She's like, I'm not even going to charge you. She's like, it's going to be well worth it. So Mike gets his skates on, and myself, Dave, JT, if there would have been anyone around to bet with, I would have given probably 50-1 that Mike was going to fall down probably within the first 30 seconds. This guy gets out there. I'm not going to say he skated around gracefully or anything like that. We're not going to embellish it, but
right.
He didn't fall. He wavered a couple of times, but he didn't fall. He made it around, and I was shocked. I'm still shocked by it. Like, I watched the video of it yesterday, and it's almost like I can't believe that this wasn't edited and there's not some secret footage somewhere of you just like instantly falling down and like busting up your wrist or something.
Didn't happen. I stayed on my feet.
What was the secret? Because I've been on the ice skating rink one time in my life. I'll be honest, I could barely stand. There was no chance of any movement.
Yeah, and gravity's not on my side. I'm a heavy guy, right? I certainly am not. My center of gravity is not near the ground, where falling is not possible. I'm mad that you guys, none of you decided to go with me. Like, you left me on an island, like, and you were all like going, "This is a really bad idea. Like, this is not going to end well."
I mean, I thought you were going to fall and like break your arm or something, honestly.
Well, we didn't do that, but
just because my personal experience, like I said, I've been on the ice one time. I could not like take a step on it hardly. I was like, I'm just out there, it's just barely standing on it, and I can't even move. So I guess I was just comparing my experience to what I was about to see.
I don't even know. I think it was literally an instantaneous decision to do it, because we got back and I'm like, okay, what if I got out on the ice and we filmed it? Because that would be funny. I thought it'd be more funny if I actually fell. Assuming I didn't want to hurt myself badly or anything, but it'd be kind of funny to see me kind of take a spill.
I totally thought you were joking when you were talking about it. Like, I thought, not in my wildest dreams were you actually going to get out there.
Well, I did. It was fun. I wish I only did 2 laps, one kind of half lap and then one a little larger lap. And I was like, okay, I'm pushing my luck here. I'm going to go ahead and stop. And but I would have stayed out there. That was kind of fun trying to figure it out.
I think you got off at the right time.
You did into that.
I think you had really pushed it, because on your way back, there was a couple of times where I thought, oh, he's losing it right here. This is it.
Here he goes.
Yeah, you got off at the right time. Keep your perfect record intact.
Well, let's finish the conversation with kind of overall everything put together, minus the travel fiascos, but just your impression of the show. Is it something you would go back to? Is it something you would want to do again? Like, what, just kind of your final thoughts and takeaways from that show?
I mean, I think of this show probably in the same way that I do a lot of shows. Maybe kind of like the Burbank show. Would I like to go back again sometime? Yes, probably so. Is it like a must go, like every year thing? Probably not. I mean, unless you're just wanting to like hang out with friends and stuff like that, which oftentimes that is why I go to shows. Let's be real. But I mean, if you're like, let's say if you're just going strictly to buy cards and stuff like that, I mean, I don't know that the show is big enough to warrant. It depends on where you live. Like, if you have to travel a long distance, like we do, I don't think it's like a must go every year, but it's definitely one that I wouldn't mind going to again at some point, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to separate the card part of it and the friend part of it.
Yeah.
From a purely go for cards, there wasn't anything there that you can't see at a national or, you know, a Dallas show, a Burbank show. That's not completely true, but by and large, most everything there's Manels and Koufaxes and Aarons everywhere, and Mays and all the stuff that's in that vintage era. There was probably more pre-war at this show. So if that's your thing, then it's worth going. I would say my final thought is, if you've never been, it's worth going to check out, which is we hadn't been before, and that's why we wanted to go. Getting to see our friends and all that, certainly awesome part of that.
Yeah.
The travel for us, if I lived close, I'd go every time. No question.
Yeah. If you live in Ohio, then just go.
Ohio or any of the states around. If it's a couple-hour drive, you bet I'm going.
Yeah. If it's drivable for you, like, within a few hours, I would go every time.
Yeah. But I'm glad we went. I'm 100% glad we went.
Oh yeah.
To check it out. The cards were absolutely amazing. I can't even talk about that enough or compliment that enough. There's not enough superlatives to talk about the amazing array of inventory in the room that you could choose from. I mean, if you wanted a Koufax rookie, for example, there were 100 there, that you could choose from. So all the popular cards, what I wish there was, what I hoped to find and didn't, were kind of value boxes of vintage that were graded, kind of that mid-grade. There was all the high-end stuff, high grades, high cost cards, plenty of that to go around. But the $30 to $50 slabs, those were fewer and far between, and that was kind of where I was looking anyway. So I felt mildly disappointed with that.
Yeah.
But to that end, I get why dealers don't bring that. I mean,
there's an easy explanation to that.
You what?
There's an easy explanation to that.
Yeah, they got to make money. They're there to make money.
Like, show space is valuable.
It is. Showcase space is valuable.
It costs a lot to set up at these shows. You're not going to fly, halfway across the country to try to sell $30 to $50 cards. You're going to have to put your best stuff out there, which is also usually your most expensive stuff. And it just makes sense from that perspective.
It does. And so again, that's a mild complaint and not anything that can really change with that. But if somebody had a giant box of 50, 60, 70 slabs and there were actually one or two people that had some of that stuff.
Yeah, there was a few.
But it wasn't as prevalent as I had hoped it would be.
Yeah. And I've never been to a show yet where they're going to have everything that you want. It's just not possible. I mean,
that's what eBay's for.
Right. That's that. Yeah. Like, it's even these largest shows like the National, there's like people say you're going to see everything there. You're not. You're just not. There's just not enough room.
Yeah.
For everything.
Even at the National. Right.
Yeah. Even at the National, there's not.
But I would say I totally agree with your sentiment of, will I go again? Yeah, I could see myself going again in the future. Is this something I have to mark on the calendar and make sure I'm absolutely going? No, probably not. Did I have a great time? Of course, no question there. But it's not like, oh my gosh, you've got to go. I would say if you haven't been, you should go. If you're close, you should go 100%. But yeah, let's take Josh, our friend Josh, who's been on this channel, Rated Rookie. If he asked me, should he go to that show? I would say, yes, you should, and if he goes, I might go then, just to hang out with him. Right. That's kind of that influencer, right. Of influencing what would tip the scales for me. If no one else was going to be there and it was just me and I had to choose to pay to go there and all the things, I'd be like, nah, I'm good. I've been. Yeah.
Like when I hear about a show and somebody's asking me to go, my first question is, who's going to be there? And, somebody might hear that and they may start naming off, well, this dealer that sets up at this show and this guy that sets up at this show, they're all going to be there. I'm like, no. Who's going to be there? My friends, who's going to be there?
Right.
Because, I mean, honestly, I don't think I've ever been to a card show where I've came home and been like, man, I wish I wouldn't have went to that.
That's a good point.
I mean, because we're going to have a good time regardless. And I'm very notorious for going to these shows and not buying anything. And I feel like I have just as much fun as everybody else. So,
well, this is the part of this show where we're going to talk about Andy's pickups. And we're done. Okay, that was a great segment. But you're the craziest guy because you love cards so much. You know so much. Your knowledge is insane, and you've owned so many things over your card collecting history.
Yeah,
and you didn't buy any cards, so
that's right.
But you still had a great time, and I love hearing that. Obviously, that you can go.
I have to give the people what they expect. Like, I've developed this reputation where I'm not expected to buy any cards when I go to a show. I don't want to disappoint anyone by actually buying something.
Just so you guys know, we had put the over-under at Andy buying a card at 0.5, and I took the under, and I won. So I took the under.
Safe bet.
But anyway, we'll finish this up. Great experience. Highly recommended for the segments that I mentioned there. And there are going to be people that want to go even if they have to travel far. This is just our personal feelings about it. It's
and I mean, even with all the travel trouble that I had on the way home, I'm still glad I went. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I had a great time. It was a ton of fun. And, if it happens next year and somebody says, hey, all these people are going, do you want to go? I'm not saying I'm not going to do it again next year.
Right. Me too. I'm in the same boat. But it's not must go, have to go.
Especially if you're just going for the cards. Yeah, I would say, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. To me, the National is must go, have to go. Just because of the overall experience with the National. This was a card show in its basic, simplest form. There's just cards, and ice skating, apparently. So,
and that's one of the nice things that's appealing about it, though. It does kind of take you back to what card shows used to be. There's not all the bells and whistles. You don't have people on the intercoms like doing all this stuff and loud noises everywhere. So crowded. Like, this was kind of reminded me of just like a card show that you would have went to like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it was totally that vibe.
It's a throwback, which is
throwback show. I love it. Well, that's it for today's episode, guys. Andy, thanks, of course, for being here. And sorry about your travel trouble, and I'm glad you made it home safe.
Yeah,
and,
it was fun.
Norman said, too, you can hear him in the background. He's
Norman,
that you had that issues. But thanks, everybody. We'll catch you guys next week for another episode. Have a good one and keep collecting.